Great. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you for coming. Sorry, I was just checking whether we had. There's a holding slide, if we can bring that one up. So my name's Juliet Mian. I'm the Executive Director of the Resilience Shift. We're one of the three managing partners who've been hosting and running the Resilience Hub, the virtual and the physical platform, for the last 2 weeks. Certainly for those of us who are in Glasgow, energy levels are fairly low now, so we're going to keep this as an informal session. Anyone who's joined online, we'd love to get questions and comments throughout the whole session. So before we dive into the session itself, I'm just going to introduce the panelists that I've got with me, both in person and joining us remotely. Firstly, I've got my dear friend and longtime colleague, Savina Carluccio. So Savina is the Programme Director at the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, shortened to ICSI. And also we've been working together for a number of years on guidance and standards for climate resilient infrastructure at the Resilience Shift. Savina's worked with government, infrastructure owners, operators, multilateral development banks and NGOs to develop sustainable, resilient infrastructure that's fit for the future. As well as the roles I've already mentioned, she also, because she's a superstar, she also leads an infrastructure advisory team at Arup. I've also got here with me, thanks for coming, Peter, Peter Hall, who's Vice President and Global Director for Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure at the Wood Group, working across all the industry sectors. So Peter integrates sustainability and resilience into wood projects to deliver outputs that support climate risk, community impact, and align with finance. Peter's also the Ambassador for Climate Resilience at the Stimson Centre. He manages the firm's partnership with the Resilient Cities Network and is the business engagement lead for the UNFCCC Race to Resilience climate team. This is like a competition for who can have the most jobs in their bio. Joining us remotely, we've got Dr. Kristin McCaskill. So Kristin's an assistant professor in engineering, environment and sustainable development at the Department of Engineering at the University of Cambridge. Kristin, not so much with the jobs, but she, fun fact, I've just found out, has 4 engineering-based degrees. And before she returned to her role in academia, Kristin worked for several years as a consulting engineer in the water and transport sectors. Kristin now specialises in systems analysis to advance approaches for managing risk and system resilience. Also joining us remotely, we have Pasquale Capizzi. Pasquale leads the climate change team at Arup. He's an urban resilience and climate change specialist with 2 decades experience designing and implementing programs at a global, national, regional and city level in Asia, Africa and Latin America. Pasquale is a passionate advocate for designing, planning and delivering climate resilient and sustainable infrastructure in cities, and he's led national, municipal climate policy, regulatory and strategy development, risk and vulnerability assessments and tools, as well as providing advice to large infrastructure investments. We also have Akshaya Kannan joining us remotely. Akshaya is an urban planner in Arup's international development team. She has a multidisciplinary background, and Akshaya specialises in critical infrastructure and urban resilience and has experience advising humanitarian organisations and city governments on design, planning, strategy and economic development. So, thank you everyone. Very impressive resumes for everyone that we have joining us. So just to introduce the session here, could we pull the slide up? There was like 2... Not essential if they're not there. I'll carry on anyway. So at the Resilience Shift, we've been focusing our sort of contribution to the whole breadth of topics that have been covered over the Resilience Hub is we focus on resilient infrastructure. We've been creating, curating and sharing guidance and standards and tools that are going to help organisations, stakeholders make the changes in practice. A lot of what we've been doing from the sort of inception of the Resilience Shift is to answer the questions: what do we need to do differently? What needs to change? And also, what does good look like? And that's one of the really important things that, the question keeps on coming. With all the conversations over the past 2 weeks, everyone understands it's important, but what's the change that we need to see? So I think reflecting over the past 2 weeks at COP, at the Resilience Hub and more broadly, there's been a huge amount of conversation and discussion happening around the importance of adaptation and resilience. At the hub here, we've brought an unprecedented number of actors working across the whole value chain together, and they've been sharing theory and practice for enhancing resilience. And I think it's really been game-changing, the range of conversations that we've had here. But just looking back at one of the things that I still think we are, despite the fact that everybody's here talking about resilience, we are still fragmented. There are lots of conversations that are happening in different silos. Some of the work that we've been doing at Resilience Shift has been focused on breaking down those silos and delivering guidance that provides a golden thread and works through the different silos. So we're just going to showcase now some initiatives that we've been working on for the past year or so that have been released during the 2 weeks at COP. We've got a brief showcase, and then I'll bring all my panelists together to have a roundtable discussion where really we just want to reflect on what have we learned and what should we all be doing next to build on the momentum that we've got from the Resilience Hub. So firstly, I'm going to hand over to Savina. Thanks, Savina.
Thank you, Juliet, and good morning. So I'll start by building on what Juliet just said. I started this journey on the Resilience Shift about 4 years ago when I led a project on tools and approaches. And at the time, we started mapping tools and approaches for implementing infrastructure resilience, and we realized that the landscape of existing guidance tools and standards was really fragmented and complex and quite confusing. So, and so then, one thing that came out is that actually we need to join the dots, and we need to kind of look at it from end to end in infrastructure development so that we can break those silos. And then work done by the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, ICSI for short, also undertook a landscape review quite recently for tools and approaches, this time for sustainable and resilient infrastructure. And they came out with a similar recommendation, that there is a gap around end-to-end guidance, something that covers the whole life cycle of infrastructure. So then, in response to this gap, the Resilience Shift has developed infrastructure pathways. And that feels a little bit like the culmination of all the work that we've been doing over the last few years. And we were excited to launch infrastructure pathways this week, finally, after a few months in the making. And it is an initiative by the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, ICSI. It's been led by the Resilience Shift and in partnership with ARUP. So Infrastructure Pathways then aims to be that resource that practitioners in search of for clear, easy to navigate guidance for implementing climate resilience infrastructure are looking for. So at the moment, it is a website platform, and it is live. And we've got a video. If the video could be played, please. So I'll keep on talking, and then the video will kind of demonstrate how the platform can be used. The link has been shared on social media. We've got QR code cards here today, and we will make sure that it's shared more widely after this session. So what we're doing with infrastructure pathways to bring that clarity and consistency, we have organized, we've reviewed hundreds of resources, existing resources, so we organize them, we link them, and we also distill them in a way that is now kind of boiled down into actionable statements that are directed at different practitioners across the life cycle of infrastructure. So what is exciting, I think, about this resource is that, as I said, it addresses that gap of end-to-end across the life cycle, and then it aims to connect those practitioners with those golden thread of resilience value, but also system thinking, because that's another important gap, like not losing sight of a systems view, a system perspective at all stages of infrastructure development. So it's like, and this is not mine, I've been kind of stolen that from someone else, but it is like almost being on a relay race where you got practitioners that need to be passing on the baton of resilience, because if they don't, then the whole team will lose. So it's kind of creating that connection is quite key, and that's what we're aiming to do with infrastructure pathways. So, for example, we have, the website gives you the opportunity to, it is organized as I said, structure across the life cycle of infrastructure. Different phases are all organized in the same way. We identify the practitioners that in each phase there's a lead practitioner. We identify who they are. We've tried to explain what needs to change, what is the shift that needs to happen from current practice to actually implementing climate resilience in practice. We've tried to curate and bubble up to the top the key resources that we would recommend practitioners with very little time go to the website and click on those 3 to 5 key resources, and you can just get more information. And you know, they don't really waste time, you know, trawling through hundreds of resources. And we curated the top 3 to 5 key resources. And then we've identified themes. And we've organized the content around themes. And under each theme, then there are actions that are directed to different practitioners. So to then connect and then sort of understand, you know, that other things are important, you know, to consider when implementing climate resilience. There are interactive tags that you can see. You can click, then you can see when the text refers to, for example, evidence-based decision making. You click on an interactive tag that highlights in the text where we need to be paying attention to making decisions based on evidence and data, and that is highlighted throughout. There's also case studies to make it more real, so that it's not all just guidance, but we've made a very conscious effort to write the content in a way that is really clear and plain, and it is action-oriented. To make that link, to create that sort of relay race type of feel for the content, at the very start of each phase, life cycle phase, we've got key inputs, and at the very end we've got downstream benefits. So we kind of take inputs and the outputs from previous phases and downstream phases. We're creating those links, and we kind of highlight what needs to be borne in mind when thinking about what comes after, and then what value has been created before that we don't really want to lose. We want to protect it as the infrastructure gets developed, and it doesn't get eroded as the development progresses. So, for example, just to give an example, if I'm a city official as a practitioner and I want to be approaching infrastructure pathways, I could be using infrastructure pathway, for example, to understand a bit more on how to develop a shared systemic vision. So we've got like a specific theme talking about this, or to better understand how climate risks and vulnerabilities are affecting my city. And so then, you know, understanding, you know, and clarifying, you know, how to communicate about the climate risk and vulnerabilities with others, because sometimes a lot is lost in communication. Also, a city official could go to this table and, you know, could click, you know, it's a filterable table with all the different themes and actions, could go click on government, and so all of the actions where government needs to be the lead practitioner get highlighted, and then you can click and you can just very quickly get to the topics of interest. The other thing is that I wanted to highlight is that we've got plans for infrastructure pathways. So this is not the end, this is only just the beginning. This is a live platform, and we know the new resources get published almost every day. We haven't counted how many have been launched at COP, probably in the 20s or 30s. So therefore, this platform needs to be updated and kept current. And this is our plan, in addition to dissemination and rolling that out. So ICSI, the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, is one of the partner initiatives for the Race to Resilience. And one of our targets is linked to disseminating and rolling out infrastructure pathways to cities. So we will do this, and this is not just hypothetical. This is, you know, we've got plans, firm plans to start this engagement with cities in spring 2022. And we will do so through the Institution of Civil Engineers Brunel lecture series. So over 18 months, we will co-convene 6 regional events and post-event roundtables where we can bring together engineers and city leaders to discuss local issues and like how they can be addressed in terms of climate action, but also as an opportunity to roll out and then test how infrastructure pathways can really help. So, yes, so I think that's me, Juliet. I don't know if so that's if you want more information, I'm here, happy to talk.
Thanks very much, Sabina. That was great to see. And I think the thing that probably one of my favourite things about the infrastructure pathways is that baton passing concept that we all know who's picking up our work and what happens with it next. So thanks, Sabina. And now I'm going to ask Peter Hall to come up to talk about the Resilience Realised. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Juliet. To pull up the slides, right? Yeah, so today we want to announce a new program to really drive resilient infrastructure called Resilience Realised. There's been some communication out during the week. You may have seen it, but working in partnership with Wood and the Resilience Shift, we put together a program called Resilience Realised, which is really what we're trying to do here is showcase the best-in-class resilience projects. Like Savina just mentioned, there's a lot of key things that as an asset owner and an operator of projects you can do to make that a highly resilient project. And what we're really trying to do with this, and maybe the next slide will showcase what we're trying to do, but it's a collaboration between the Resilience Shift and Wood, and we're really trying to identify and celebrate projects that have really been designed, constructed, and operated to provide a high level of resilience. Much like Savina was talking about, we're trying to get projects to look very intentionally at how they're built for future shocks, how they can help people. In a number of levels, it's going to be an amazing program because we're looking at it to be a resource for those working in this field of what good looks like, and help to start scale really smart solutions. So, what we're trying to do is help inspire the transformational change across infrastructure, and really looking at infrastructure that's built to last, can generate co-benefits. So what I'll do is I'll kind of walk through what where we're going with this. Our first winners in the lead up to the next COP we're looking at next fall, but I can go through some of the things we're trying to accelerate this week as we're here and as a launch. So next slide. So for 2021, everyone here has heard a lot about the intersection between energy transition and sustainable infrastructure. So what we're going to do initially is focus on energy projects that can also be built in any sector. So you can build energy projects that have a huge impact in, transportation, water, mining, all kinds of different sectors. So we're looking at energy focus, but trying to find ones that can impact another sector. So much like we're hearing here, the intersection between energy transition and sustainable infrastructure. And we're really, what the showcase is trying to do is really relate the physical assets that we're building in the systems. So like Savina was talking about, trying to make sure projects keep their value over the lifespan of their project, and we're looking for projects that have been built. So, what we're trying to do here really is, with this program is really elevate and communicate projects so people understand, whether it's the engineering community, investors, it could be asset owners, cities, the private sector, the public sector, of what a great resilience project looks like, and also to use this as sort of a training tool. So to demonstrate how resilience has been embedded into a project, where at different stages in that project, the project has either lost value because we're looking at the best projects. It'd be where it's gained resilience value, and really showcase and provide proof points for this whole idea of a system project, and looking for projects that have really looked closely at the project across the whole life cycle of delivery. And our goal really is, coming out of this COP, is to have this be a showcase for what good looks like. And next slide, I'll kind of go through what we want to do as far as the resilience insights. So what we're trying to do now is we develop a framework, So we have a framework where asset owners, cities, project owners, engineering firms can submit projects. Those projects go through a framework. So that framework looks at a set of key resilience attributes, and they're key to this. So we want to see projects that have managed future risk, managed uncertainty, outcome driven. So we really want to see projects that are, great projects, but really drive community engagement, co-benefits, and really can help the people they support. Looking at projects that look at the whole system. So looking at the connected across the system, looking at how technologies can advance projects, and we're looking at projects that really address governance. So projects that can be built, examples of what great governance looks like. And what we're trying to do here is also have this be a resource. So technically what we're trying to do is, we'll award one project and have a lot of use cases behind that project, and eventually have projects in different sectors. So asset owners can look at these projects, say what worked, why did it work, see the framework. So we'll basically give a roadmap to building projects like this. So the next slide. So tactically right now, submissions are open here at COP, as we've announced it. We're looking at submissions can start really right away. So we're starting to look for selections. We're going to start to evaluate those projects in June of next year, and then basically take those projects and then start to pick with a jury the best projects, with a goal to announce these at COP27. And we're announcing a website this week that will start to roll this out. And so two things are really helping us. One, we've got several endorsing partners, which I'll mention, and we're starting to build our jury panel. So the next slide, I think, highlights that. Well, actually, I'll mention the partners. So right now we've got folks, and I'll just list the names that we've got as partners: Thomas Smith of ASCE, Meredith Alder, Student Energy, Deborah Roberts with IPCC, Mark Watts, C40, Rahit Aragwa with the International Public Affairs at Columbia. Nigel Topping is going to be on our jury panel. Abhilash Panda and Anna Wellenstein from the World Bank. So a really great list of high-profile jurors that are really going to give us traction. And some of the endorsing partners are AGWA, ARIP, ICLEI, Resilience First, Student Energy, Resilient Cities Catalyst, Resilient Cities Networks, and Student Energy. And we're going to build more. So we're trying to really combine a world-class jury panel, partners around infrastructure. So we're announcing it this week. We're excited, and I'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's great to see. Anyone who's interested, but the website for Resilience Realize is exactly that, resiliencerealize.org. So we'll be sort of reaching out and pushing people to submit entries. And I think the two things that we've shared so far complement each other very well. So the end-to-end guidance to create that clarity and consistency, and then supporting that with real-life case studies that actually show what good looks like. So Akshaya now is going to contribute another piece of guidance that fits within that, focusing specifically on the governance that we need for resilient infrastructure. So Akshaya is waiting patient in our green room, so she should be ready to join now. Thanks, Akshaya.
Thanks, Juliet. My name is Akshaya Kannan. I'm an architect and planner at ADAP, and my work primarily focuses on infrastructure and urban resilience, as Juliet had mentioned. I've been working with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the Resilience Shift, who collaborated on a white paper exploring the governance of infrastructure as a key enabler for implementing resilience. This was launched last week in Glasgow at COP26. The paper highlights that we need to push the boundaries of traditional governance because governance for resilience needs to be adaptive. It needs to recognize and embrace complexity and uncertainty and take a whole systems view. Based on a lot of extensive literature review and stakeholder engagement, we identified 7 themes for which we emphasized opportunities over challenges. So some of these are the whole systems perspective, adaptive capacity, prioritizing infrastructure needs, infrastructure financing, regulation, codes and standards, capacity and resourcing, technology and data. We have considered the governance needed through all stages of the infrastructure lifecycle. So just as Sabina had mentioned, through from policies and plans all the way to end of life. And what we're doing is sort of justifying the need for resilient actions and how they contribute to the whole system's resilience. While the paper addresses all infrastructure stakeholders, the majority of the actions are focused on government and investors. And some of these include setting up of cross-sectoral bodies to reduce fragmentation, periodically updating infrastructure policies, frameworks, and regulation, encouraging and promoting system-wide learning outcomes, adopting evidence-based approaches for infrastructure planning and asset management, and much more. These themes and their related actions are significantly interdependent and need to be considered to be, considered and implemented collectively to really have the maximum impact. For example, having capacity and resources and data is essential for better understanding the system and for prioritizing where resilience strengthening is required. Based on these themes, we also focus on the governance challenges and key actions that need to be taken at each stage of the life cycle for nature-based solutions, which complement other gray infrastructure resilient initiatives. Through the paper, we've also tried to convey the urgency of implementing good governance for resilience, while currently leaders and negotiators are trying to reach an agreement on how to tackle the climate crisis. Governance really takes the forefront, and the decade to 2030 will be crucial for the future of the infrastructure sector specifically. So we will now play a short video introducing the paper, at the end of which there is a QR code that you can scan to get access to the paper, but it is also available on CDRI's website as well as both CDRI and Resilience Shift social media. Thank you.
Infrastructure systems around the globe are increasingly at risk from a range of natural hazards and long-term climate change. These systems protect, provide, and connect our societies. As a result, the consequences of failure can be significant.
If infrastructure does not withstand extreme events, then evacuation of people in disasters get affected. When infrastructure collapses, then all the livelihood systems get affected.
Significant investment is planned in infrastructure in the next decade globally. This is partly a response to the economic recovery as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the increasing urgency to decarbonize our infrastructure systems. Resources must be invested wisely to achieve high-quality infrastructure systems and services. Strengthening governance systems will ensure that infrastructure is of high quality, is sustainable over the long term, and is resilient to uncertain and emerging hazards and risks. The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the Resilience Shift are collaborating to advance the debate on where opportunities exist to improve infrastructure governance. Through extensive literature review and engagement with governments and infrastructure practitioners around the globe, 7 key themes have emerged where opportunities exist to improve infrastructure governance to support the development of resilient systems.
O Ministério da Infraestrutura tem como uma de suas diretrizes socioambientais promover a inserção da mudança do clima na infraestrutura de transportes. A governança de uma iniciativa inovadora como essa requer cooperação e coordenação entre as partes interessadas, cujos valores e prioridades devem estar alinhados.
More recently, efforts have been made to integrate built infrastructure with nature-based solutions in order to sustain and restore valuable ecosystem functions and services. We have an opportunity to change the governance of our infrastructure for the better. This will ensure that these systems are resilient and provide significant benefits for both today's and future society.
Now is the time to act. We urgently need to improve the governance of our infrastructure systems. Governance is fundamental to our infrastructure systems, as efficiency and effectiveness of infrastructure can only be achieved through strong institutions and policies that ensure transparency and accountability.
Great. Thank you, Akshaya, and thanks to the CDRI for their support and partnership on producing that paper. So the final showcase we have before we move into our panel session is around the learning that needs to happen in parallel with all of the guidance, the best practice examples, the governance. We need to upskill a huge body of engineers to be thinking about resilience from the very beginning. So over to Kristen McCaskill, who's also joining remotely.
Thanks, Juliet. Can you hear me yet? Hello.
We can hear you, Kristen, yeah.
This morning I'd like to introduce to you a mini-series that we have created called Resilience Engineered. We have done a couple of showcase releases of episode 1, but I just wanted to explain the basis behind the series. So last year we did a review of what education and learning opportunities are out there for practitioners who are interested in upskilling and in thinking more broadly about the work that they do in bringing more resilience to our infrastructure. And one thing that we observed is that there is, some formal education opportunities out there, but we appreciate that not everyone has the scope or opportunity to take time out of their work life to further engage in formal education. And last year in particular, we saw an explosion of opportunities to jump onto webinars around the world with people talking about their experiences. But with that, we also observed that everyone, personally experienced that we all have limited time to be able to engage with this, so that when we do jump in and engage with something as part of our continuing professional development, we really want to make sure it's high quality and that we get something out of it. So the basis of Resilience Engineered is to try and provide a series of short episodes. They're less than 30 minutes that are really condensed and cover a lot of ground within the episode itself. So we covered we tried to bring in the concepts of a lecture, a webinar, and a documentary into one short or a series of 3 short episodes. And we hope that they provide the foundation for people as a starting point to get more people engaged with the concept of resilience and try and cut through that fragmentation of what other speakers have talked about this morning around what it means for everyone and provide a starting point for that. I'll stop talking because we have a trailer for episode 1. And for those who are interested in further engaging with us, please do get hold of the Resilience Shift, or you can contact me. You can find me through the University of Cambridge. We're happy to engage with you and try and share the material with you to get it out there. We'd really appreciate working with you all to get some engagement with it. So I'll hand it over to the trailer to explain more about it.
We are constantly making assumptions about the future. These assumptions shape our thinking. They help us make decisions. But what if they're wrong? The world is constantly changing, faster than we might be ready for. Throughout history, our society has been rocked by catastrophic events. Earthquakes around the world destroy buildings and livelihoods. 2020's pandemic brought the world to a standstill. Looking forward, climate change will shape both the nature and frequency of extreme events, as well as general trends in weather. As humans, we tend to fixate on numbers, models, and probabilities based on past data. We downplay the possibilities of extreme events, even those experienced before. This does not help us build a safe, sustainable, and resilient world. We need a shift in thinking. We have created 3 episodes where we explore what shift might be possible.
We created this series to demonstrate the significance of resilience for infrastructure, because when we make decisions about planning and managing our infrastructure, we are making decisions about our future.
If we are more resilient, we can cope with extreme events.
And people do take the models too seriously.
You can't be in a position when the event happens and then you have to make it up.
We will show how our interpretation of risk, uncertainty, and resilience shapes our decisions, and why we need to think about the future differently.
Excellent, thank you. I do love that film, so I would recommend anyone to contact us to have it. It's 25 minutes, so it's perfect to sort of watch with colleagues or watch in a lunch break or something. So thank you so much for all of those presentations. I think for me, what's great about this, and so many of the conversations that have been happening over COP are about the urgency of change. And this work, I think, overall shows the sort of shift in practice and the guidance that's coming out for each stage of the value chain. And for me, that's what matters, like hitting every part at once, because we can't afford to only change the upstream planning and then wait however many years it will take for that to cascade down. So whatever can be done at every stage in the infrastructure life cycle should be done now, and that's really what this sort of suite of products is aiming at. So I'm now going to invite Savina and Peter, who are here in person, and Pasquale and Kristen virtually, to join us for a panel discussion. Love to hear any questions. So if anyone in the room, just wave and we'll come over to you. The same for anyone who's joining online. Just type a question in and we'll try and feed that through. Sorry, just opening my phone to see if questions are coming. So I was going to start by picking on Pasquale, who has been watching the sort of session so far as, I guess, more of an observer. But Pasquale, I know you've been at COP for the last week and a half. So be interested to hear your reflections on what we've seen and really where we go from here in terms of breaking down some of these silos that still exist in terms of how we talk about resilience, how we influence resilience. So that question to Pasquale.
Thank you, Juliet. I'm trying to organize my thoughts as far as possible. As I said, it's been a week and a half. It's also been a long month for all of us. I'll try to make sense. There are two words that I think describe what I'm feeling about this almost 2 weeks at COP. One is the energy I'm feeling and the sense of emergency or urgency that wasn't there before. Having been at few COPs, including COP21, I can definitely say that this one is different, at least as far as resilience is concerned, and that's a great thing. A couple of thoughts. The first one, I think, in some of the events I've attended or we've run, there's been this idea that resilience is a decision for today in infrastructure, and happily we do have very sophisticated tools that are being developed. Some of them we are involved, some of them we are simply observers or reviewers, but that's a good thing. So how to integrate resilience thinking practically into the life cycle of the infrastructure, from upstream, downstream to the design, and then finally delivery and operation mode. So that's great. At the same time, I think what we need to go from here in this respect is to make them more practical, more accessible, and easy to use and normalized. So great part of this, but there's work to do to make these tools more practical and accessible. The second point, I think it's everything that we discussed around nature. I personally thought that we were going to discuss nature even more from the lead up to COP and the conversation that we had around nature. I think we were going to hear a little bit more about that, but I think one of the most interesting things I heard is some of the investors that were there thinking of new ways on how to make nature safe and viable investment for infrastructure. And the sentence I heard, the phrase I heard was that the return for investments from nature when it's a hybrid or a substitute solution for infrastructure, can be a safe investment. It may pay back a bit later, but it will pay back tenfold. So I thought that was an important statement around nature and infrastructure. However, again, I think where we need to go from here, I think we need to have a conversation on how this can really work. The appetite around investment in nature as a solution for infrastructure is still to be clearly understood. And I think we're going to have this conversation in the next years or so. Also, nature, I think we've got great experience. We've seen great experience where this is a practical solution. We have been involved in some of them ourselves. For example, in Peru, building nature-based solution on 17 river bays. It's basically the size of the UK, almost. And so it does work, and it works at scale, which is great. I also think that part of the conversation we should have is about pristine land and infrastructure that's going to be developed in some of the emerging markets where most of the investments will be. Because it's also about making sure that we don't only use nature as a commodity or as a solution, but we also try and protect nature. I was very interested in seeing the mayor of Kilimani involved in that, having worked for years in Mozambique. I know this is one of the issues. And finally, thoughts around breaking silos and where we go from here. And all the great things I've seen is partnerships, really. Some very honest and true deep partnerships around important partners. I think that to take this further, I think we need to find a platform like the Resilience Shift or like the CDRI or the CCRI that can make these partnerships even more effective. And finally, I just conclude by saying that one thing that we all went in with is the idea that we should merge this race to resilience, to the race to zero. I think that really is a message that we must take away, talking of breaking silences, because there really is only one race, and we need to race it together, really, in partnerships. So I'll stop here. I know everyone's been attending many of these events, so I wanted to thank everyone for this wonderful 2 weeks. I look forward to work with you all in the next months or so.
Thank you so much, Pasquale. Some really good reflections there. And just to recap, you talked about the need for guidance and publications to be practical. Absolutely agree. The need for nature to feature much more strongly across everything we do. And I think from the conversations that have started recently, that is going to be the key focus looking forward. The need for partnerships and collaboration, 100% agree. And that's how silos get broken down. The silos are going to stay while we're all in our own individual organizations pursuing our own agendas. And there's only one race. I think that's a really good way of summarizing it. And I think for me, before COP, I was worried that there were two races, but the conversations that I've heard are actually so many of them saying exactly that. We just need to get to resilient solutions, and they need to be net zero, and we need to do it all together. I'm going to invite Kristin now, because Kristin, I know you haven't been at COP. You've been busy teaching, researching, delivering, and I'm sure tracking whatever you could. But it'd be interesting to hear from you what do you think we need to pull out of the huge quantity of discussions, publications, announcements from the 2 weeks, and to start putting them into practice and sharing them with the wider community. I mean, with the Resilience Hub, we have sought to be inclusive by having the virtual platform, but I also recognize, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there who still need to get this message. So any reflections from you on that, Kristin, would be great.
Thanks, Juliet. I think that the biggest thing that comes to mind for me from observing the last 2 weeks is that the amount of material that is coming out is phenomenal. There is so much out there, and we're all really busy working on our own projects, trying to get our own things out there. I think one of the things that we should be trying to do going forward is to engage with the material that others are producing and try to work together to get that message out there and to actually put that material or the advice and the guidance into practice. Because if we're all busy focusing just on our own things, no one's going to pick up the good work and actually put it to use. So I think, just building on what Pasquale said earlier, if we can collaborate and actually see the value in the work that others are doing, and I guess lead by supporting them as well. For me, that is probably the biggest takeaway from COP, because I've seen so many people put so much effort into what they're doing. I think we can fall into the trap of not giving enough time to be supporting others.
Thanks, Chris, and I do think that's a really good point. And when we're talking about races, and we can barely keep up with the rate of publication and the rate of sharing knowledge, before we even start to put that into practice and make it practical. So really need to think hard about how we do that, and things like the Infrastructure Pathways Savina that seeks to sift through that. And this is why Infrastructure Pathways is a website, not a book, because if we published a book today, then next week our book would be out of date already. So we're going to move to the panel in the room. I think, Peter, you've been here for the full 2 weeks. I'm sure you're, apart from anything else, you're absolutely exhausted. But what are you excited about, Peter? What are you going to take from this once you've recovered your energy and really lean into?
Yeah, a couple things building on those points. My understanding is the first COP where they've actually talked about resilience on trying to be on an equal plane with net zero. So for me, it was really pretty amazing to see the connection between race to zero and how it's not just energy; it's centered around people. So to see the conversation elevated for resilience and really people talking about we have to solve both together. I was in the plenary yesterday. It was really clear that, we've got to look at both resilience and net zero together. We can't achieve where we need to get to without both. So that was encouraging. I think for me, the number of private sector companies here in mayors and cities was pretty amazing. And it relates to what I think Pascal was saying, partnerships. And what Savina showed, and really for the Resilience Realized work, none of those projects can be built like in a silo. So it's the idea that we have to really foster partnerships. On the downside, even though we're talking about resilience, the financing needed for adaptation is still nowhere close to where it needs to be. So I think the recognition that we need to get more financing, and it relates to all the work we talked about today, that investors and companies and partners, they need to know, they need to have a pathway. So so it's encouraging. It's really encouraging to see the two talked about together. I've heard the next COP is going to build on resilience, nature, and finance, which is a really great progression from here. But it's really going to be a challenge for all of us, I think, to not just talk about pathways and systems, but actually get them into projects so people can see the actual benefit. And then the other part is measurement, right? Because we're pretty good at measuring net zero. I think we're getting better. It's harder with resilience, how you measure it, especially the social output of infrastructure. So I think a lot of things we're talking about today, whether it's showcases, pathways, if those can get to projects and we can start to really measure the opportunity to scale is phenomenal. So it's been a great 2 weeks.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, and there's some really key points there, and the finance that needs to be unlocked, and linking in with what Pasquale was saying, the finance for the nature-based solutions, which is the emerging issue of nature-based solutions needs to catch up. And I think that some of these issues are really difficult, but the longer we sit and think about how difficult they are, infrastructure is getting built, and it's not the infrastructure we actually need for the future. And with the planning horizon and the life cycle of infrastructure, that's why this is so urgent. So I think there's some really good points in there. I'm going to move to Savina. So reflection from you, Savina, and this is a big one. So see how you can answer it. But what will you be doing differently in your work? Maybe some of this relates to the work that you actually do advising clients in Arup, or what would you like to be doing differently? Like, what should the work you do be looking like in, say, 5 years' time? Huge question. Over to you.
So only just 30 seconds. No. Okay, so I'll start by saying this is my first COP, so I'm a newbie. I don't have anything to compare against from the past. But what I've seen in the last week has really inspired me, because I do hear this is not enough. I hear this, but I also feel that so many people are coming together to actually to the resilience and adaptation, agenda. And now thinking, like that has grown so much. I think in this COP, and even the fact that we're here in the Resilience Hub, very first Resilience Hub. 7,500 people joined online in events during the Resilience Hub COP, if I quote the right number. So that's amazing. And the Resilience Hub is not just the only place where resilience and adaptation are being talked about. So that is inspiring. And the other thing that is inspiring me is the race to resilience. I must say, whoever really, like they obviously Nigel and Gonzalo done a great job, and the team supporting them, amazing job. So what I've actually found out at COP is the opportunity to team up, that partnership and collaboration. I've had so many conversations, very, very productive conversations with other initiatives that are, actually we're all pulling in the same direction, but we need to be coordinating more. And I think the Race to Resilience has really tried quite hard to create those links already. So two things to celebrate for me, despite that might not be enough, and despite the fact that this is urgent. But I do feel inspired. I do feel that what I want to go back to my day job. I need to try harder. I need to be faster, more aggressive in actually implementing, resilience and in whatever I do, and I need to be, I dare say, pushier with clients, because with my hat on, the clients sometimes they don't ask for resilience because maybe they just don't think about it. They're starting to see the impacts of climate change, obviously disrupting their services, but they don't naturally come to you asking the resilience question. So I think, that's one thing I'll be doing differently, is like being a lot more, let's say, forward in trying to put this in practice, my day job.
Thank you, Savina. I'm looking forward to seeing you be more aggressive. I'm not sure that you have that in your personality. But I do think there's some really important, I'm just going to check. So we did have one question come through, which is, I think that's because we've talked a lot about what needs to be financed and what needs to be delivered, but also what can communities do? What could we do sort of voluntarily in communities, in local government, in cities to build resilience? And I do think that's really important for all of us. I think most of us here are in the engineering profession. Much more interconnection between the infrastructure we're building and the people who use it, because it's not the infrastructure on its own that delivers resilience, it's community resilience. There were some interesting, I think, case studies that we could look into a bit more from COVID, where actually because there was no physical impact, it became all about the community and how they responded. And a lot of that is still relevant when we're looking at infrastructure systems and how things respond. So I'm just going to pass that question as well, I think, to Peter. So anything that can be done voluntarily, local government and cities, in addition to what we're looking to finance from the sort of higher level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things with all the work here, we're trying to link infrastructure, to be more than just a project. It's like the services the project provides, especially the cities and communities. So making that link between infrastructure and impact. So like Savina was saying, for me, it's like a lot of my day job work is getting resilience into our projects. Communities and clients don't always ask for it, but when you explain it to them, most get it. You're better off getting it in, having them built to last, having higher impact projects. But from the community side, well, a couple things. I think as cities get more involved, they're going to ask for this. So that's one piece. And I think for all of our work, the more community engagement there is early on planning the projects, so they're in the right places, they benefit the right people, that helps. This week we actually rolled out with Resilient Cities Network, so another partner, this resilient infrastructure and diversity and equity scorecard. So the idea that when we build projects, we can really improve diversity, education, opportunities. So on our end, pushing it out, right, as an engineering firm with partners, but then as cities see that, hopefully, they're going to start to ask for more than that. And over time, you know, in a perfect world, that would be like the normal. So it comes down to partnerships, engagement, and you have to really work with communities early with the right people. And I think from what I've heard here with all the different, we have like the race to resilience for cities group, and they're all pulling on the same thread. So I think it's going to change quickly.
Great, good to hear, and thank you. So we've thank you to the questioner for providing some contact details, and we'd love to follow up afterwards. And I think probably that final point about the community is, this is the point that we've all been talking about in terms of bringing things together. I sometimes worry when we talk about the resilience of communities that we're expecting communities to just deal with this on their own. I think our role working in the infrastructure sector is to provide the services that they need. There is a role in community, there is a role with finance, there's a role in government. So that whole value chain approach really sort of comes together in that question. So I'm going to close the session now. Thank you so much to everyone. I think there were some really, really exciting things shared, and we're really looking forward to starting to amplify and put those into practice through the Race to Resilience and other ways. So thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you.